In today's video, I want to make you feel old. I want your back to ache and your knees to creak. I'm going to draw attention to the changed price, the lower end price now, the much decreased, the crashed, some might say, price of old Magic the Gathering staples. I want to do this for a few reasons. Firstly, it is quite funny to see how far the mighty have fallen, but also to make people aware of how stocks in the inventories of sellers and local game stores are eroding in value. This is an issue that Magic faces going forward. Part of the business model of the secondary market is buying low and selling high, and whilst I'm no financial expert, it is a little concern that a lot of the value in the oldest cards is just fading away. I'm going to avoid talking about reserve list staples and collectibles in this video and focus on modern framing stuff, cards that can be and are being reprinted right now. I'm also going to go out and say right here, right now, that I think accessibility is great. I think the lower price for staples, bit of play formats like Modern or Pioneer is a good thing. It's very important for the long-term health of formats that aren't Commander, you know, formats that do still exist. However, I do believe that having chase versions of cards, collectible versions of cards, expensive versions of cards is important. It helps the secondary market and the economy to exist. It helps this whole infrastructure around the game that has propped it up for this long to exist. At present time, Wizards of the Coast have done pretty well to crash the price of staples, but they aren't retaining the collectability of chase variants either, because there are approximately 1 billion chase variants of everything now. So you don't bother to chase or covet something special, because everything is special. So let's take a trip down memory lane, all via the route of the price of expensive pieces of luxury cardboard. I'm going to provide a little bit of commentary on why some of this stuff is happening, although I'm not financially minded, shall we say. I'm much more of an artiste, a piss artist. But is it because of power creep? Artificial rotation inducing super staples from Modern Horizons? Or is it all more spread out? Is there something more to it than that? Also, it makes me feel good about selling some Snapcasts at the beginning of COVID because they just continued to spiral downwards. And if you're looking to pick up any of the singles and staples that we talk about in this video, Cool Stuff Inc. do sell singles and sealed product. There's a link in the description below. Use the code KENOBI at checkout and get 5% off your order. Let's start with the big boy, shall we? It's Tarmogoyf. At one point, fills of this bad boy was selling for the price of a games console. Now, on an OG Tarmogoyf with a unique frame of Future Sight is sub 40 bucks, while someone less fussy can get a Tarmogoyf for $10 to $20 depending on seller, if they're happy for the old art and the new frame from Time Spiral Master that I personally think is one of the better looking Tarmogoyfs. Tarmogoyf's Fall from Grace is a much more complicated one than a lot of the cards that I'm going to talk about today. Tarmogoyf was not only reprinted multiple times, and I'm talking multiple times, it's been reprinted into the ground, which I'm happy to see, as Tarmogoyf was a super staple at one point. It was like the best green creature ever printed. And in spite of those reprints, it wasn't going down in price as fast as people expected because it had a price memory. Some iconic cards like Tarmogoyf, like Jace, the Mind Sculptor, like I guess maybe even Baneslayer, though I haven't checked, they have a price memory. Exactly what affects that is probably a whole discussion in and of itself, but it's the idea that people look at these iconic cards and they can't let them go for any cheaper than what they believe they're worth. So they just don't sell because no one was willing to drop the price. But that didn't last forever, and alongside the printing of a little card called Fatal Push, a lot of low-end creatures like Tarmogoyf became just a lot worse in Modern and Legacy. The king is dead, although he's still playable, perhaps more playable than people give him credit for. Do you remember Scolding Tarn? Well, this is Scolding Tarn now. Do you feel old yet? I was going to use that meme on Tarmogoyf, but I actually moved it to this part of the script to spread the jokes out. And it doesn't actually work here, because Scolding Tarn isn't in the bin. At its utmost peak, it was over $100 for an OG Zendikar one. It's now sitting around $30 on average across all printings, with a few versions going for less than that. Weirdly, the Onslaught and Karn's fetches are creeping up due to not getting a non-expedition printing since Karn's blocks. It's been years since we saw a Wooded Foothills reprint, for example. Foothills itself sits at $35 depending on edition, which means it's dearer than a Tarn, which is just wild. In my head, a Tarn is always the most expensive one. Liliana of the Veil is currently at almost 20 bucks in places, a card that was upwards of $120 each at her peak before Dominaria released in 2018. Snapcaster Mage is 20 bucks right now compared to a peak of nearly 80 at 3 different instances on its timeline across the 8 years prior to today. I read that very weirdly. The 8 years prior to today? The last 8 years, for fuck's sake, Vince. Do you remember when Vendilion Cleat was upwards of 70 bucks? I do, because I bought 2 of the fucking things. Now it's less than 5 bucks, which is madness. And Cryptic Command was always like the best counterspell ever printed if you were going for utility, and it's now $7, falling from like an all-time high around 40 bucks. The mighty truly have fallen. Engineered Explosives is one of the most played cards in Modern, so I want to highlight this. I'm talking about cards that don't see a whole lot of play anymore, but Explosives sees quite a bit of play. And it's slowly trending downwards with only one print in the last 4 years. It was $20 and it's now $10. It trended downward over the last couple of years by 50%. Now, is this all about reprints? Well, no, there are other factors, power creep being one of them. Modern Horizons as a set managed to push most things out of the format. Now, more so than ever, cards from standard sets too don't ever really enter the older formats unless they can compete with not only the entire card pool of Magic the Gathering, but also cards designed to be better than the entire card pool of Magic the Gathering. That is an unbelievably tall bar to pass, but some cards do manage. Ledger Shredder managed it from Streets of Cocobana and sits at over $20 per card at the moment as a card currently in standard that sees Modern and Legacy play too. So it is doable. But then again, standard prices aren't what they once were either, and they really don't drive the demand or the price of cards much. It's incredibly cheap to get into standard right now, with only like 15 or so cards at more than $30, compared to what it has been in the past at least. I can remember when Baby Mini Jace was like $80 a pop while in standard, and even Siege Rhino, I got a few printing supplementary products as well, was still a $15 rare. But what you've got to remember is that Arena is cannibalizing that audience. There is no demand, and then that means no increase in costs. Even Wizards staff, they've speculated out loud how or why has standard been drowned, they say, as Wizards of the Coast's hands lay on its shoulders, submerging it beneath the proverbial bathwaters. Anyway, only 25 cards in the entire Modern card pool sell for consistently over $30 right now, and 8 of those cards are printed in the Modern Horizons sets, both 1 and 2. That makes 32% of the above $30 cards being Modern Horizons editions. This surprises me. I expected there to be more of them be from Modern Horizons. However, if you start to look at where those expensive cards sit in terms of amount of times played in the format, how popular they are in the format, it starts to tell the whole story. These cards from Modern Horizons are the most expensive cards in the format. Ragavan is the most expensive card in the format right now, which single-handedly pushes Blue-Red Murktide as a deck to over $1,000. Ragavan is the most expensive card in Modern right now at $75, closely followed at current time according to Goldfish by Sheoldred, the Apocalypse, which is a mythic rare from the latest set that's also playable in multiple formats too. And then we've got things like Chalice of the Void and Cavern of the Souls running up behind at just sub $60. But looking back at deck prices for a second, Footfalls is another tier 1 deck, or at least 1.5 arguably, and it's over $1,000 with no monkeys. Instead it has 4 copies of Fury and 4 copies of Force of Negation to push the price towards silly heights. 8 of the 10 most played creatures in Modern right now are from Modern Horizons sets, if Goldfish is to be believed. And those cards tend to be the ones that sit on this list of being incredibly expensive. I'm going to come back to it in the summary of the video, but it feels like the value found in the Modern card pool right now in terms of secondary market cost is all sort of top heavy. It's all put into the Modern Horizons cards that are chased and desired because they're the ones that are the most playable. And if we look away from Modern for a moment at Commander, there's an erasure of long-term value there as well, as staples that always held a little bit of value, Oracles of Moldiah, Arcane Signet, 3 Visits, Felwar Stone, Baubles and such. They've all gone down by as much as 50 or even 80% in some cases due to largely reprints, not power creep. All those cards still see play, but they are regularly reprinted to make the Commander decks better than they used to be, at least. And do you remember when Mana Drain was like one of the most expensive cards you could get for Commander, while a Legends copy now only costs you $240? An absolute bargain, I'm sure you'll admit, which moves it down from the $400 peak it once had. And you can just instead, if you're not looking to be, if that's too rich for your blood, you can just go for a non-Legends one at $40. Wildly better for accessibility than it once was. This is a weird video for me to make, because I'm trying to make videos that can be watched 5 years from now and still be enjoyable, and I guess this will be an artifact of its time, as these card prices will change as 5 years progress, of course. But what I wanted to do with this video is just to highlight that Magic cards off the reserve list seem to be just trending downwards overall. It was a concern brought up by a blog written by a store owner recently that got viral on Twitter that spawned me to start considering a video like this. I spoke to a couple of store owners too who don't want to go on record or be publicly talked about in the video, but a few of them did talk to me about how their stocks are just eroding. What you've got to remember is that the power level of new cards crushing old ones, then the sheer level of reprints, and people just not playing those older formats anymore due to a lack of a scene in their area, or a lack of interest and support from Wizards of the Coast. All of those things have a knock-on effect on card prices, which then thus all have a knock-on effect on stores and sellers. There's an ecosystem in Magic and it's delicate. Without sellers you can't buy cards, without stores you can't really play Magic, or at least not at events. You can play on your friend's kitchen table, you can play Commander, but trying to play a tournament, well, I guess that might be the way of the past if we're not careful. It becomes uneconomical to stock this stuff and pay staff to pick it all out, package it and ship it off when even Commander staples are sub $1 at this point. One of the vendors I spoke to said that a good reprint should reduce the price of cards. They're not expecting things to stay expensive forever. They said that maybe it should reduce it by 30 to 60%. But at the moment, reprints and excessive printing are variances pushing the majority of cards to bulk level prices. And at that point, they say they're just providing a service to keep their customers happy. And some of those customers will buy more expensive items, or they can make a margin elsewhere. But some vendors and some sellers online can't make margins elsewhere. There isn't food and drink to be sold, or tables to be hired, or other games played in your store to almost offset the cost of providing this service to keep people happy. Historically speaking, you'd sit on Magic cards and some of them would rotate out of formats, fall out of favour, or get reprinted and crash in price. But on average, on the whole, prices of staples would go up, and then would have periodic drops in some as others increase, and that was just how it worked. But now, predominantly, most staples are just trending downwards if they're not on the reserve list, if they can be reprinted by Wizards. Overall, it's a weird place to be. I do think that reprint and accessibility is important, especially when those formats need to be played. But then I'm at a point now where I'm like, is Modern and Legacy going to continue to even be a popular format with the way that we don't really have... There's no focus on competitive play anymore, which is something that I want to talk more and more about because it's killed my love of those formats in some ways. Legacy feels like it's been left to fucking rot to decks that take up 20 to 30% of the metagame that feel like shit to play against, and there's not really any events to play in anyway. At that point, does accessibility matter? Is the game just a collectible? Should we just fucking proxy everything anyway? It's a hard place and a hard conversation to have because there's an entire economy based around this. Like I said earlier, it feels like now more so than ever the value is hyper-focused into the powerhouse staples like Dockside Extortionists and Furies, and the reprint equity is just top-heavy because Wizards have reprinted everything else quite a lot. And ultimately, what am I saying is the solution? An ideal world, we have accessible cards to play the game with, and we have chase rares that are like variants of those cards. So I've talked about this before in videos with how Thalia has like a $2 version and a $50 version, and I think that's great. But does that work for the local game store? Does that work to keep these companies in still trading? And I did reach out to my sponsor as well. I want some balance here. I wanted to make sure I wasn't being too doom and gloom because I'm seeing this all from the outside looking in. I am not a store owner. Cool Stuff Inc., my sponsor, says, Cool Stuff Inc. does not see things quite so dire. In fact, we've seen growth in Magic on our site and in our stores. The pivot to more casual focused Magic has impacted things, but not all of them negatively. Your mileage as a store owner will always vary, especially in today's markets with so many additional products offering a wide array to different communities. So it's not all doom and gloom. Like, Magic is still booming. There is just issues coming that will have an effect on your local area, your local stores, and your local scene. Has this affected you? Have you been buying and selling cards? Has your collection just plummeted in value? And are you okay with that? Or does that frustrate you in some ways? Are you a store owner? Are you a seller on Card Market or TCG Player? Either way, let me know in the comment section below how you feel. I'm going to read all the comments. I generally find them useful for coming up with ideas for new videos too. I'm basically mining you for content. I hope you found this little trip down memory lane helpful or interesting or just thought-provoking in some way. Thanks for watching, smash the like button, and share this video with your friends if you want to get them involved in the conversation as well. I've been Vince, also known as PleasantKenobi on the internet. If you're buying some of these cards, use Cool Stuff Inc. to help support the channel, and I'll see you all soon. Ta-ta for now.